Hello everyone, welcome to Royal News Network. My name is Brittany and today we are going to be talking about how the Windsor family has really given up their mother, their grandmother, their great-grandmother, their aunt, their great-aunt, their cousin, up to the nation so that they can properly mourn her as well. And this really very much historic event, which hasn't happened in 70 years and is a time-honored tradition that goes back at least a century. And it's just going to be this beautiful moment where the country and people all over the world can remember the life, the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. And I think there was no group more moved, of course, than the Windsors themselves. So I'll be just kind of discussing the overall procession and then what we kind of saw in the Palace of Westminster. And don't worry at all, we will have a whole video discussing Harry and Meghan at a later date about this because I have some interesting thoughts, but I really wanted to focus on kind of the Windsors in this situation and how really we see their grief, we see their mourning, we see their loss, and I think that's an exceptionally beautiful thing, and I think it shows again on display to the world how the Windsors are nothing like Harry and Meghan described them. But if you guys haven't been here to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany, and on this channel we talk about everything related to royal, so that's news, gossip, fashion, jewelry, television shows, movies, and history. We will do it all right here. So if you guys want to subscribe, that would be fantastic. And today is a day I was kind of looking forward to in a way because I knew we could see basically all the members of the family, including their spouses. So we've seen, kind of Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, we saw Prince Andrew, and we've seen Princess Anne and Zara Phillips. We've seen members of the family, but we really haven't seen kind of the broader royal community. And this is kind of an opportunity to do so, and definitely the Windsors did not let us down. So this procession started out of Buckingham Palace. So last night the Queen's body came and they placed her in one of the ballrooms, and it was a time for just the family to mourn her. So I would imagine, we know that Harry and Meghan arrived, we know that Catherine and William arrived, we know Charles was there, but I imagine perhaps the rest of her grandchildren, great-grandchildren were there. I would hope so. I believe probably her cousins and, her niece and nephew and so many other family members really got this opportunity to mourn her in person and really for her last night she was in Buckingham Palace, kind of just remind themselves of who she was, her legacy, and probably give those personal anecdotes that only so few know and really have this quiet family moment. Because unfortunately, when you're royal, your grief is kind of on display to the world, which I'm sure is very, very hard. And so we saw this procession begin and we heard kind of the marching band. So go ahead and take a listen to this. As this procession rounding Queen Victoria's memorial there, we did see kind of how the royal order was laid out. We got some instances of it, but it wasn't really clear until the morning of. Obviously, Her Majesty's children were in the first row. They were lined up in birth order, so not in order of succession, because actually Andrew and Edward would supersede Anne in this situation, but Anne stood next to her brother, and then Prince Andrew, and then Prince Edward. And then we have the second row, which was actually Prince William, Prince Harry, so they walked together, and Peter Phillips. And then behind them we had Lord Snowdon, so this is the Queen's nephew. He walked behind, and obviously we have as well Sir Timothy Lawrence, so that's Queen Anne's husband, and it looks like the Duke of Gloucester behind them. The Duke of Kent and the Prince Michael of Kent are both seeming to struggle with mobility issues, so they did not take part in the walk as far as I could tell. So this procession moves down the mile, and so go ahead and take a look at some of these gorgeous images. Yes, I just kind of love, I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine because I was there actually for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee just in June. So I feel like I saw the whole procession in kind of its glory in kind of a time of celebration. It would have been wonderful to see it in kind of a time of mourning too, and how it's a bit different, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. So it was kind of, though, amazing to watch this come through. And what was really impressive was the imperial state crown. So this is a crown which has the second star of Africa in it. So this is a Cullinan 2 diamond. The Cullinan 1 diamond is in the scepter. So the Cullinan diamond, if you don't know, I actually did a whole report on this in high school, believe it or not. So I've always been a little bit nerdy about diamonds and jewelry. But it still remains the largest flawless diamond ever found. It was 3,106 carats when it was found. It was sold then to the British Crown and was struck into 150 different pieces. And the two largest are called, the stars of Africa, and now reside in the imperial state crown and the imperial scepter. So if you go to the Tower of London, you can actually see both of these pieces in person. It also has kind of the black ruby in it, some very, very historic gems in this crown. And so to see it on top of the carriage was really unique and interesting, and especially when we would get these great close-up shots of the diamond, you could just really see it sparkling. So I thought that was very, very cool. And so as they're making kind of these processions through the crowds, every once in a while you hear some cheering, and it was just really evident that everybody was very, very moved. There was crowds along every side, so everybody was there to really honor Her Majesty and her legacy and her family, because at the end of the day, the Queen felt like to the world almost like their grandmother. Everybody knew the Queen, everybody's seen the Queen, not in person, but people have seen her, basically throughout their lives in one way or another. So her death really, I think, strikes everyone because it was kind of sudden. There wasn't something where it's like, well, the Queen is gravely ill and we know she's going to pass away. I believe whatever happened actually quite quickly and was a bit of a surprise because nobody was there. I think if this had been something more expected, or if she had been declining for a couple of days, then they would have had actually the whole family at Balmoral for that event, I think. But that's just not what happened. And so I think there's still probably a sense of shock among the family members. And we also had this kind of interesting kind of discussion, and in a way the procession actually looks rather different than what we saw at Prince Philip's. In a way it's the same because obviously it was, Princess Anne and Prince Charles at the time, who's now King Charles, walked together, and then you have Prince Andrew and Edward, and then we had William, Peter Phillips in the middle, and Harry. And it was agreed upon at the time that everybody would be in mourning dress. There would be no military uniforms, in part to avoid angering Harry and Andrew. And obviously this was just after the Oprah Winfrey interview happened. And so at this point, the palace is just like, no, we don't care anymore. Everybody, you guys are going to stand together instead of Peter Phillips being in the middle, because this was, you got to imagine, this was like a little over a month after the explosive Oprah Winfrey interview that Harry and William did this procession together. So I don't think they definitely were not on good terms at the time, and still are not on good terms, despite what some of the American media want to tell you. They're not on good terms. But they did decide to go ahead and do this. But I did think it was interesting that Charles put his foot down and said, okay, the working members of the royal family, they can wear their military uniforms. Harry and Andrew, even though those are the two actually with the, besides Sir Timothy Lawrence, the most extensive military experience, we're told, no, we're not playing this game anymore. You can, but we are going to do it. So I just thought that was interesting and shows how things are changing a bit, and how I think in a way they're less interested in coddling Harry and his demands. And we also saw that Harry had to issue this statement basically explaining and kind of being a little bit petulant, like, well, I still had 10 years of military service, but I'm okay wearing the mourning outfit, when we know he wasn't. And this became, I think, probably the most evident when they walked past the Cenotaph, which is the World War I memorial. This is where they have their Veterans Day event every single year, Remembrance Sunday. And the royals in military uniform got to salute, and those in not had to bow their heads. And I'm sure that was kind of a point of contention where probably, I think more Harry than probably Andrew really just felt the great divide. I think at this point Andrew is kind of a bit beaten down and a bit kind of raw. He was exceptionally close to his mother, and we have always been told that he was her favorite. And so I'm sure that loss of that bond, and that loss to a certain extent of that protector, because Her Majesty, I think, protected Andrew in a lot of ways, I'm sure has been very hard for him, and he's just kind of wondering how all the everything will fall at the end of the day. And so I'm sure there's just kind of a worry, and he didn't want to kind of push it with his brother. And so he said yes, whereas Harry, did it, but very begrudgingly. And so as they're kind of turning and going towards the Palace of Westminster, you just feel the emotions of this moment, and how, they're giving their queen to the people. They're giving their grandmother, their mother, they're giving her to the people. And I think, again, that's a very tough thing about being a royal, is knowing, about, they're estimating 400,000 people will file past. And it's just kind of interesting to think about. And I did forget to mention, we saw, and I thought this was very, very interesting, the way it was filmed. And I imagine that there was probably really only one version of this. And so it was as the women were leaving. So we knew that Camilla, Catherine, Sophie, and Meghan would ride in cars to the event. What we saw is obviously Catherine and Camilla in the leading car together. But when it came to Meghan and Sophie, the camera cut away to a wide shot and never tried to look in the car, which I thought was very interesting. It was like they were making very much this kind of effort not to perhaps feature her. Obviously, we did get some pictures. And as the ladies arrived, this was filmed, although it wasn't shown in the broadcast. What was really interesting is that obviously Camilla got out first, Catherine followed, so that was the order of precedence. So, Camilla is queen, Catherine is the Princess of Wales. But who got out of the car next was Sophie, who technically is a countess, not a duchess. Although there's definitely very much a contention that she will become the Duchess of Edinburgh, as Edward will be elevated to the Duke of Edinburgh. That has been something that's been talked about, discussed, and pretty much affirmed for the last several years. But it was interesting that Sophie got out first before Meghan, and Meghan was very much clearly the last. And there was also this exchange, and I would love if somebody knows who this gentleman is, and I'll show a picture that we got at the end of the event as well. But Sophie goes out, and you can tell she's very, very mournful, and she goes up to him, and she kind of, I think touches his hand and kind of has this kind of moment. And as Meghan gets out, the camera kind of cuts away, but you see her doing the same thing to the guy. And it's like, I don't think you spent much time with any of these people, really. Why are you mimicking what Sophie is doing? Because Sophie's actually spent, and probably knows him and spent a lot of time with him. You haven't spent time with anybody. Why are you kind of emulating Sophie? So I thought that was kind of an interesting moment. And the ladies lined up, and then obviously as the coffin came through, they all curtsied. We saw that in a couple of pictures as well. And as the coffin was kind of taken up to the dais, and I just see these soldiers, and their job is to kind of, have the coffin on their shoulders, and they have to guide it up the steps. And all I could think was, my gosh, the imperial state crown is sitting there on top. What are you going to do if it falls over? I just can't imagine the pressure. And one of the guys did look quite emotional, I thought, but I can't imagine the pressure of having your queen, your commander-in-chief, and you're carrying her coffin, in addition to the fact that, there's a flag on it, which kind of adds an additional barrier, in addition to having one of the largest cut diamonds in the entire world sitting on top in a crown with very much historic jewels. You don't want that thing to fall off, but they did an exceptional job. So bravo to those gentlemen. I know that couldn't have been an easy job, and I'm sure that's a job they will kind of treasure for the rest of their life. And so just to kind of give you guys a sense too of the service, go ahead and listen to this beautiful song. All right, I just love, so there's something about the acoustics of old, cathedrals. If you've never been in a cathedral or kind of an open space like that in some of these older buildings, just the acoustics are amazing because they had to be at the time. And so just to kind of hear that song, it's very sorrowful, it's very moving. And so I just really enjoyed hearing that section. And then we also had a bit of a passage of scripture. So go ahead and listen to this as well.
Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also.
I just thought, knowing the Christian faith and knowing that there's just something incredibly moving about that piece of scripture, and I thought that was very, very appropriate one to share. And I just can't imagine the mansion that the queen would have. I mean, she has higher standards than most, so I would be curious what mansion has been prepared for her, because she was a deeply devout woman, and so you can feel that throughout this event. And I also thought there was just they went back and they did another song. And there was just this funny little bit where one of the choir men went, no. And so there that kind of went around, and you're just curious. I wonder if that's something he needs to do in order to get to the higher registers. I don't know. All right, guys, I just thought that was funny. And, it's obviously a very solemn and sorrowful moment, but, I think sometimes to find a bit of levity in these situations, I think sometimes it's good for the soul, because otherwise it's just, the weight of what's going on, I think, is very palpable. And what we saw as well, and I didn't point this out earlier, is that when the rest of the royals came in, there's this whole line of the minor royals. So in the front row is Mike Tyndall, Zara Phillips, Princess Eugenie and her husband Jack, and then Edda, who's Beatrice's husband, and then Beatrice, and then Lady Louise and Viscount Severn. And so they were in the front, and then behind are all kind of the minor royals. So this includes Sarah Chateau, who is the Queen's niece, and her son Arthur, who's in the armed forces, and you have Lady Amalia Windsor, who's kind of become known for being a bit of an it girl and a pseudo model. And then we have kind of the Kents, and so this is Prince Michael Kent, his wife, and then there, Lady Gabriella Windsor, and then Lord Frederick Windsor. And so we just have all these kind of minor royals behind them who can really represent the rest of the family in many ways. And goes to show again that the royals, there's more than just kind of the immediate family. And I really felt like throughout this service, I was kind of frustrated that we didn't see any close-ups of, the Queen's other grandchildren. It was all focused obviously on the main line, and I kind of get that, but I was really hoping to see more of the rest of the family, because we only just saw cursory glances of them, and I had to pour through pictures to find other family members who were there, because otherwise you just couldn't see very many. And I just thought that was a little bit frustrating. Perhaps one of the most historic and kind of almost ancient traditions in a way of this service was the Vigil, the members of the Vigil. So these are members of the armed forces. So they will be the first to stand guard over Her Majesty's coffin as members of the public file past. And I just thought it was really cool to see them come down. And then somebody posted pictures of King George V and VI and Edward, I believe it's the 8th, maybe 7th, and their kind of memorials, and how really throughout time these things haven't changed that much. And I think that's what people love, or at least I love as a historian, about kind of the British monarchy and the British traditions, is though even though probably to most Americans they seem somewhat archaic, that they've been born out of generations upon generations of traditions, of heritage, of amending them. And yet, although things are still new, some things remain the same. And so I just think there's a beauty in that continuity and that thread of history that goes through things. And so I just really enjoyed that moment and seeing that.
They take their positions on the corner of the catafalque. A double tap from the stick of the officer of the watch, commanding the procedure of the watch, the start, the finish, and the rotation of the guard.
And so then we get to kind of everybody, the service has ended and members of the royal family are beginning to leave. And as they file past, I thought it was kind of interesting to watch how things went. And so obviously Charles and Camilla did not curtsy to the coffin, as they are monarchs. Princess Anne didn't either, and I wonder I would guess it's probably because she's in military uniform, and so she did not curtsy. She didn't really even see to bow her head much though. But I feel like that is, her right to do so. And then we had Andrew, and then obviously Edward Edward and Sophie. And here's where I thought it got kind of interesting, because as I was watching it again, just kind of preparing, I noticed that Edward went up and bowed his head first. Sophie curtsied behind him. So they didn't go at the same time. Edward went first, then Sophie. And then when it came to Catherine and William bowed his head first. And then after he went, Catherine curtsied. And of course, Harry and Meghan, who cannot follow royal protocol to save their lives, curtsied and bowed at the same time. And then Meghan started leaving before Harry. And again, this goes all back to the fact that Meghan cannot follow royal protocol at all. She doesn't like it. And then, of course, they had to hold hands. I kind of joked on Twitter with somebody that, that her hand is literally like, their hands are like surgically attached now. And it's just kind of frustrating because in that situation, it's not appropriate. Although, to be fair, Zara and Mike Tyndall did end up holding hands as well. But I think kind of it goes back to is that Harry and Meghan always have to do it. It feels like more of a prop than them actually doing it just spontaneously or anything like that. It feels like something they feel like they have to do. It's like this very demonstrative gesture rather than being something where somebody needs comfort and just wants to hold each other's hand. And actually, we even got a shot, one of the photographers got a shot of like them in the process of trying to get their hands together. And again, it just wasn't the time or place for it. This is an official state occasion. PDA with royals has always been kept to a minimum. I mean, I can't even think of a time the Queen and Prince Philip held hands, but they do have 4 children. They were married 73 years, so I don't think they need to hold hands to prove their love. And the Brits are just not very demonstrative. We've seen Catherine and William hold their hands a couple of times, but it's usually kind of in the Bahamas, we saw them holding their hands while they were privately on their way to an engagement and a bit kind of as they were leaving. So it's not something they do, and we've seen them do this in their off time, but they don't do it when they're at official state occasions. So again, Harry and Meghan not following protocol once again. And when they were kind of leaving, and what we didn't see though was the rest of the family doing their kind of curtsies as they left. We saw Lady Louise do it. We didn't really see, kind of Beatrice and Edo and, Princess Eugenie and everyone doing it. There weren't pictures. I just don't know why. It was just kind of frustrating because I feel like we missed so much and we couldn't see. And it was just kind of a bit frustrating to me to not be able to see the rest of the minor royals. We also had the Queen's cousin. So this is, again, the Duke of Kent, Prince Michael Kent, and the Duke of Gloucester. And they obviously are much older now, especially the Duke of Kent and Prince Michael of Kent. I remember them at Philip's service of Thanksgiving, thinking both of them looked like they were having a really, really hard time walking. So I know Prince Michael of Kent has pretty much retired from royal duties. The Duke of Kent, I think, is still a working royal, although he's kind of has wound down a lot of the engagements that he's doing. And then we also have obviously the Duke of Gloucester, and I believe he's still working as well, although I believe him and his wife vacated an apartment that in Kensington Palace to kind of downsize, which was supposed to go to Harry and Meghan, and obviously Harry and Meghan ended up at Frogmore. And so these have been the Queen's cousins, that they've been working members of the royal family for most of their lives. I believe it is the Duke of Gloucester, who was actually an architect, and he was kind of doing his own thing and was then kind of drafted as a working member of the royal family. So it's not just the Queen. Other members of the royal family have given up their lives to service to their country. And I think that's a beautiful thing to see, and again, a beautiful thing to honor. As they're leaving, we got kind of a couple of interesting shots, but the one I think that moved me the most is that, I mean, you can say all you want about Prince Andrew, but I love this picture. It was him, Beatrice, and Eugenie, and they're all clasping their hands together. And I think that again shows that despite, what you may say about Andrew and how awful people think he is, I mean, this guy heckled him, just yesterday or the day before, that, at the end of the day, they're still a family. And we saw this family unit together, and we saw this kind of the spirit of mourning, of loss, but also kind of the sense that they are a family unit. They are close to each other. They interact with each other. Obviously, Harry and Meghan, I don't think, are necessarily part of that equation anymore, but they are very close, and even the extended members of the family, because Her Majesty was very close to her niece and nephew. So this is Princess Margaret's children, Lord Snowdon and Lady Sarah Chateau. And these two, lost their mother quite young because she died 20 years ago. And the Queen really became kind of a second mother to them and really became a grandmother to their children. So I know Lady Margarita Armstrong Jones, you know, the Queen Elizabeth was kind of her grandmother, because her grandmother actually died when she was quite young. I don't even know if she was born yet. I would have to double check that. She wasn't really even born, or just a baby, when her grandmother passed away. So they didn't get that connection. So I think the Queen has always felt a great burden for her niece and nephew and for their children, because they've lost out on really growing up with their grandmother. So Lady Margarita is the daughter of Earl Snowdon. So it's just kind of beautiful to see all these family members come together and kind of united in their grief. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the funeral holds, not because I'm looking forward to the funeral itself, but just hearing the music, because again, there's something about these old cathedrals that are just incredible. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they kind of manage, you know, the Harry and Meghan situation, and how, again, they remind the world of who the Queen is and her great legacy to the United Kingdom. And so guys, that's pretty much all I have for this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. Obviously, we've done a lot on Harry and Meghan. You guys absolutely love those. But I just thought today, I really just thought there was a great opportunity to share what's going on within the monarchy itself. But fear not, I have like a whole kind of video idea that I'm thinking of doing, kind of about how Meghan has really proved in this situation how she is completely out of her depth. She is, when she's not the center of attention. And I think she's somebody, in my personal opinion, who, because she lacks depth, she thinks she's very deep and very intellectual, but when you hear her, when you actually look at her words and really think about what she's saying, she's really not saying anything that noteworthy. But when it comes to events like this, I feel like she almost just can't even appreciate it, because she doesn't have the depth to understand really totally what's going on. So be on the lookout for that video that should be coming soon. I'll probably film that video today and maybe edit and release it tomorrow. And just on the update on the Waleses as well, what I read on Twitter recently is that they are going to spend kind of the next several days in the weekend in Norfolk at their home. And so I think that'll be a great opportunity for them to kind of unwind away from the public, and also kind of put some distance between them and Harry and Meghan. And so we probably won't see much of the Waleses or most of the rest of the royal family members probably for the rest of this week, but we shall see. Thank you guys so much for watching, and 30,000! I can't believe it, guys. I feel like I just did a thank you video for 25 and now we're at 30. So guys, thank you so much for watching and all your support. It makes these kind of long days, long nights so worth it, because I do love this. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.